The concrete trench. Before dawn on June 6, 1944, the dunes above the Normandy surf were still black when German soldier Stefan Heineves took his post inside a tobuk, a half-buried concrete box with a slit onto the beach. He was a young veteran, wounded in Sicily and now posted to the Atlantic Wall with the 709th Static Infantry Division, not because he was weak, but because he knew how the Americans fought. In his corner of France, he was about to meet the largest amphibious assault in history without even knowing it. Beside him stood Sepp, a Belgian volunteer whose fervor for Nazism burned hotter than the steel he handled. Together, they tended an MG-34 on a swivel shield, their tiny bunker tied into a wider knot of defenses around a reinforced beach house locals called the Strong House, anti-tank guns, machine gun nests, interlocking arcs of fire that dominated the seawall. All night, the air trembled. Allied aircraft droned overhead, more than usual, ceaseless. In the tobuk's slit, Heineves watched searchlights scratch at the sky while flak thundered blind. Around 1 a.m., an officer arrived astride a motorcycle, breath steaming in the dark to confirm what the noise already said. Paratroopers were falling farther south. The field telephone crackled, but orders were smoke and silence. Command is aware. Just before dawn, the world detonated. Naval guns tore open the earth. The bunker shook, its concrete cracked. Heineves and Sepp pulled back into the cavity, while the beach outside turned to ash and mud. When the shaking eased, the first things he saw weren't men at all. Wounded cows careening through shell bursts, some aflame, some bleeding out. One with burning legs lunged straight at the slit. Heineves' first shot of D-Day was not at a man, but at a charging animal. Through mist and smoke, he made out strange silhouettes closing on the coast. Odd, square-shouldered craft crawling toward them. An American Mustang plowed into the sand in front of the fort. The cockpit trapped its pilot as fire took him, his ammunition cooking off in a wild glitter of tracers. Then the war narrowed to a single line of sight. Sepp, peering through binoculars, snapped backward, hit clean through the throat, a second round pulverizing his chest. He died where he stood. Heineves raked the trees with fire. A grenade skittered into the slit and popped, standing him with a sting. In the grass, a camouflage helmet rose. An American tried to flank the bunker. Heineves cut him down. Movement on the beach. German figures sprinting for cover, staggered and fell. One boy took a headshot and was no longer a face. Another clutched his gut and screamed. An officer, fresh, steady, slid into the tobuk with an MP-40. Out, now. The fortified house is gone. Flamethrowers. Fall back to the second line, 2 kilometers inland. They backed away. Heineves limping and firing in bursts to cover the retreat, the MG-34 still warm in his hands. 3 American bodies lay ahead. One twitched. The lieutenant didn't pause. He put a round through the moving man's head, then through the other 2. A German scooped up a Thompson, coveted steel and a liability in one. Carry the enemy's weapon, and you could be shot on sight. They hadn't gone far before 2 of their own simply disappeared into the smoke. The lieutenant spat his verdict. Desertion. Surrender. They're not taking prisoners today. He said the Americans had burned the garrison alive inside the Strong House. Maybe rumor, maybe truth. Either way, they pressed on through scrub and low trees, beneath the endless snarl of fighter bombers. The breeze dragged a sickening blend of smells across their faces, burning rubber, spilled fuel and charred flesh. The retreat, the road and the cage. The pain in his leg sharpened with every step, but Stefan kept moving. Smoke and grit clung to his skin. In a stand of trees, they stumbled onto a knot of civilians and forced laborers. Russians, Poles, men and women by the hundreds of thousands across France, sleeping in stations, herded under guard, made to dig roads and haul stone for fortifications. One prisoner muttered something. Mockery, plea. No one could tell. The German lieutenant didn't ask again. He raised his pistol and put a round into the man's chest. Stefan, sticky with blood and dust, didn't look back. He limped on, wounded, exhausted, uniform in tatters, until the next German strongpoint finally rose out of the haze. A paramedic found him there and prodded along his ribs. The verdict was quick. Several were broken. He and a few others were piled into a horse-drawn cart for the rear. Beside him lay men barely recognizable, hands or eyes gone, skin fused to burned uniforms, faces blackened and split by fire. Stefan could still walk. That felt like theft. He knew with the cold clarity only war teaches that survival was chance, not courage. They sent him to a convalescent center at the southern edge of the sector. Light duty, strip and repair rifles, nurse machine guns that had come back from the front mangled and hot. The work was simple. The nights were not. Sleep broke on the same reef, Sep torn apart in an instant, thunderbolts screaming down on bunkers, phosphorus bursts turning men into white fire, a column of young SS sealed into a burning grave on wheels. While his ribs knit, he tracked the front. A beachhead had become a bridgehead. Cherbourg fell, and with it, the last pretense that the enemy could be pushed back into the sea. Some swore they'd encircle the Allies, bleed them, then throw them out. Most could see that was a dream. The army that landed on June 6th was a machine without edges, fuel, shells, aircraft, a storm of steel that didn't seem to run out. By July, half mended, Stefan was reassigned. No more bunkers, no more MG-34 at a slit in the concrete. He was given the wheel of an Opel truck, ammo and grenade runs up to the line, rear routes, bomb dodging, live long enough to turn around and do it again. Desperation now had a schedule. It didn't last. That same month, evacuating a forward zone, his little logistics column met American armor in the trees. Shermans rolled out of the leaves like houses on tracks. The men with Stefan had rifles, a few grenades, and nothing like a chance. They lifted their hands. At the POW cage near the coast, the scale finally registered. 2,000 men, no ranks, no branches. Here, Kriegsmarine, tank crews, Luftwaffe techs, even a few SS. No one asked about patches anymore. One truth hung over them all. Germany had lost the sky, lost the sea, and the land would be next. The Americans let the prisoners organize themselves. Tasks were handed out, a rough discipline regrew. No mistreatment, no comforts. What there was, everywhere, was efficiency. Trucks never stopped coming. Planes netted the sky by day and night. When a vehicle broke, they didn't fix it. They pushed it aside and brought a new one. The abundance bruised the eye. Sealed food tins, rations flown from an ocean away, mountains of cigarettes stacked like daily bread. For men who had bled to save every bolt, it was a lesson and an insult. This was an industrial colossus that could throw away what Germany couldn't afford to lose. Some officers still whispered about counterattacks, about secret weapons, about divisions that would turn the map back. But Stefan, and many like him, had seen too much. The images of a burning Tobruk, the garrison roasted in its own walls, the road collapsing under a column of men who died on fire, those didn't yield to speeches. Surrender hadn't ended his war. It just moved it indoors. Every night it came back. The same reel of smoke, heat and faces he could no longer forget. When Stefan closed his eyes, the film didn't stop. He had fought to keep the Reich's borders unbroken, to stop the enemy before they reached Germany. In Normandy, he learned the enemy wasn't only another army. It was the clock. It was the machine. It was the certainty of something coming that wouldn't be stopped. The defeat wasn't the day we stacked our rifles, he would think. It was the night none of us ever slept again. By the time he walked free months later, the war had changed shape. No more trenches or flanks. Now it was memory. What you choose to remember, what you can't forget, and what won't let you live if you try. Machine gunner on Omaha Beach. Atop the cliffs west of Veerville, Gefreiter Henrik Nab waited inside a resistance nest of the Atlantic Wall. An MG-42 under steel decking, concrete trenches, barbed wire, mines hammered into the chalk. A dozen men lived there like animals under iron. Until June 6, 1944, the sea was a rumor. That morning, the horizon filled with shadows. From a little after 2, heavy bombers turned the sky into a drum. Explosions walked the night to the south and east. Under a full moon dulled by clouds, the water lay too calm. The men felt it anyway, jaw muscles clenched, a tremor none of them would name. Before dawn, the mist peeled back, and the fleet stopped being silhouettes and became a wall, grey, solid, endless. They weren't ships, Nab thought. They were the final judgment. No Luftwaffe above, no German ships between cliff and armada. The nest felt alone before the first shot. Then the fire fell. Shells from the battleships pounded the rock itself. Concrete hummed. Trench edges shattered. Air turned to a high, constant whine. A man tried to bolt. The moment his helmet cleared, shrapnel cut him in two. Steam rose off his body in the cold breeze, and the trench filled with the smell of raw flesh. Nab's eyes bled at the corners from the pressure. When he cracked the steel lid, a Tobruk bunker nearby was simply gone. Machine gun, men, replaced by limbs in a fog of dust. Silence hit. Dense. Wrong. No birds. No wind. Just the twist of hot metal and the whisper of the tide. The landing began. Barges approached in precise lines. Ramps dropped. Americans walked down in single file, hands on each other's packs like drill on a parade square. Some dropped before the water touched them. Others waded to the chest-deep line. "Fire!" The MG-42 bellowed. Recoil hammered his shoulder. Drums blurred one into the next. The rounds slapped the water with a dry crack like nails into wet wood. Men fell like cut strings. Red spread in blotches, then in sheets. Some screamed, some sank without a sound. A leg drifted, a headless torso rolled in the wash. An arm still held a rifle while the body that owned it slid along the bottom. The beach is a slaughterhouse, he told himself, because naming it made the hands keep working. The 88S barked. Naval shells kept walking inland. With every new wave, crossfire stitched the surf. A few men reached the sand. A few crawled to the iron hedgehogs. Sniper shots picked them off. Grenades finished what the sea spared. Flames took others. Guts shone in the wet light. Soldiers dragged faceless friends by the straps. Nab fired until the barrel went red. He swapped drums with numb fingers caked in dust and blood. His face burned. His ears rang in a high note that never ended. The loader beside him retched and sobbed and kept feeding belts. And still the Americans came. Like machines, they rose, stepped over bodies, crawled crater to crater, lifted their rifles, kept moving. One nest after another fell silent, not from lack of will, but under the math of metal and men no cliff could balance forever. They kept coming. When the MG went silent, Allied heavy guns flattened the line. Rockets found the ammo stacks. One detonation lit another until men fell like stricken dominoes. Henrik Nab, blood on his hands that wasn't all his, kept the trigger down, but he already knew the dawn at Veerville would mark him forever. He aimed. He fired. The tears weren't for the men in his sights anymore. They were for himself, for the certainty that even if he crawled off this cliff alive, nothing could burn away what he'd seen. This isn't a battle, he thought. It's a human flood. He slapped in another drum. The bayonet on his belt was already freckled with rust from the salt that ate everything. He leaned into the shield and sent a burst into the neck of a soldier clawing forward over bodies like stepping stones. Accurate. Useless. For every man who fell, 3 climbed out of the water. A sergeant lurched past, face split by a shard of steel, shouting an order Nab didn't catch. The MG-42's drum spun empty. Silence. Corporal Nab lay on his back, arm a shattered pipe, his breath ragged, eyes fixed on the white sky. The loader had already folded, his gut emptied by a low shot. When he toppled, the gun went quiet with him. The trench reeked of blood, cordite, and urine. What had been a fighting position was a gap in the earth, a grave yawning open. A grenade rolled among the dead like a cursed toy. He threw himself sideways as it burst. The world went dim and heavy. No sound, no feeling, only pressure on his chest and warmth running down his spine. When the tone returned, the first thing he saw was his rifle, cracked in half. The second was the absence. His right leg had become pain and nothing else. He tried to move. His body refused. A face rose over the parapet, young, blackened with soot and mud, an American with glassy eyes and a locked jaw. The German raised his hand without thinking, not to fight, just because the body remembered. The other man didn't fire. He looked for a beat, then lowered his rifle and moved on, as if death already owned what he was leaving behind. Nab dragged himself into a shallow scoop in the wall, not for cover, only to be out of the way. The sky was a clear Bavarian blue. He thought of his mother, of the trees, of the bicycle he never fixed, of the letter he never wrote. A sound like cloth tearing, then the long growl of flame. Steel burned. A scream climbed into a register no human voice should reach. The beach shook. The world shook. He didn't. A German doctor crawled into view, Red Cross crooked on his neck. He glanced at the leg, shook his head, drove a needle home. Fire raced his veins. Words came and went. Nab's mouth made blood instead of language. Boots hammered the rim, many of them. Heavy. A shadow fell across his face. Another enemy. Cold metal touched his forehead. "Not this one!" someone shouted in hard, fast English. The barrel lifted. They left him there, useful as a warning, as scenery for the men still climbing. The 88S were dumb. The MGs were ghosts. Smoke lay thick and black. Above it, the uninterrupted thunder of engines as the ships unloaded men and crates and more of the day's work. He shut his eyes. Pain crawled up his back. The other leg hurt now too, for reasons his mind couldn't hold. Voices braided together. His mother calling him to dinner. The radio crackling in the kitchen, a horse nickering, his sister singing, a river talking around stones. A burst stitched the air above him and moved on. Something dropped on his chest. A blanket. A hand found his neck. More English. Maybe they said his name. Maybe his brain gave him one. Hands lifted him. He screamed into the roar, unheard. Darkness came and went. Iodine dragged him back. A canvas roof, shadows speaking English. Scissors cut his tunic. Shame, then cold, then nausea, then the fall again. He surfaced inside a tent stamped with blood-colored crescents where stretchers pressed the canvas, surrounded by the breathing and the silence of men who'd seen the same sea. Machine gunner on Omaha, under the hot canvas. Some were screaming, others were praying. Germans, Americans, some without arms, others without faces, all the same under the hot canvas. A prisoner, a number, a wound, a photo. Norba's face looking up at the sky lived now in the eyes of the American who hadn't killed him. An officer with an interpreter sat beside his cot, asking his name, age, unit. He answered on autopilot. Then came a question that didn't fit the form. What was he feeling? He stared past them into a place with no language. One more, one less. Weeks blurred. A hospital ship, then a camp in England, interrogations, paperwork, indifference. He learned to walk with a crutch, dragging what was left of his leg. Hot food, clean clothes, a window facing the sea he could no longer look at without tasting iron and hearing the wet crack of flesh. I can't see water without seeing blood. Defending Gold Beach, the sentinel of La Riviere. Martin Ing was 20 when they posted him to the Atlantic Wall. Tall, broad-shouldered, a reader with bad lungs and perfect eyes. First an anti-aircraft assistant near Munich, then west to a beach battery by La Riviere with the 716th Static Infantry Division. 288S, an MG-34. A concrete den cut into the slope, its fields of fire sweeping the beach, the seawall road, the town's approach. Life there felt almost normal. Rations filled out by quiet trades with locals. Fresh eggs for cigarettes, a cut of meat for petrol or leather. The invasion was a rumor they trained for and then laughed away over beer. The sky hummed before the truth arrived. On June 5th, after a friendly bar, the engine buzz overhead thickened. Dawn came roaring. Bombers, fighters, the Feldwebel's shouts. They sprinted the path to the bunker. Martin slid behind the MG-34 port and froze. The sea was paved with ships from horizon to shore. Then the bombardment. Giant shells screamed past and burst behind the line. Ship-launched rockets slapped the concrete, rattling the rebar in its bones. An officer stepped in, and a breath later shrapnel took his face and eye. Martin curled, palms over his ears as the bunker shuddered like a bell. Silence is only the breath between storms. Ramps dropped. The first landing craft burned on the obstacles or took hits from the 88S. Others opened and poured men into surf. Martin fed the MG-34 while the gunner stitched precise bursts into the ranks. An entire file folded before the water reached their waists. An 88 caught a craft. Engulfed in fire, it slid ashore, crushing its own. The beach became a furnace. Bodies, smoke, burning vehicles. From the esplanade, British fire found the bunker. A Churchill lobbed shells over the seawall and toppled it. The first men clawed up through the breach, and Martin watched them fall to his gun. Some froze, some ran, others pushed. At the far end, the secondary bunker went dark, bazooka or mortar. The MG-34's barrel glowed, smoke soured his sight. He dashed for ammo, stepped around the officer's body, got barked back to his slot. A fresh wave crossed the stones. Many dropped, their uniforms smoking on the hot cobbles. A Sherman loomed through the haze. The 88S had he loaded, not armor-piercing. The tank trundled to the bunker's mouth. A hit crippled its track. Another set the engine alight. 2 crewmen tried to bail out and were cut down, burning. Hell has corridors. A Churchill ground forward behind the wreck, firing straight into the 88's embrasure and killing the gun. At the MG port, a British soldier, eyes bloodshot and coat grey with dust, popped a grenade into the slit and hosed a Sten through after it. The gunner took rounds through chest and skull. Martin, shielded by his helmet, caught splinters, rolled off the line and bolted down the passage. Inside was wreckage, wounded gunners crawling, ceilings flaking concrete. The pistol-waving officer from moments earlier reappeared and staggered into a burst. The roof began to sag. Martin and another man slipped out the rear door into the sunken path and joined cooks and aides with rifles and MP-40s. A man tried to surrender. A shot to the head folded him where he knelt. Mercy has no translator. Bayonets flashed. The British stormed the road. Hand-to-hand detonated, stabbing, point-blank fire, blood and screaming, and the earth shaking with engines. Martin and a half-blinded comrade broke toward a farm and fell in with fresh troops, Panzer Grenadiers with Panzerfausts and an MG-42. A 75mm pack bumped into place behind them. Different air now, orders, experience, a little wire, a little sandbag faith. From the smoke, a strange Sherman crawled out, rotating drums, flailing chains, a mine-clearing beast ripping a corridor open with thunder. 2 more followed, widening the wound across the sand. The pack spoke. One hit shoved a flailer aside, another snapped a track, a third stopped it, fire pouring from its vents. A crewman leapt, and an MG-42 cut him down. Then the mortars fell, sudden blossoms of steel and dirt, shrapnel scythed the ridge. The blinded man who'd run with Martin took a direct hit and writhed, blood pumping. Another lay with his skull split, grey matter exposed. The farmhouse took rounds, timbers jumping in their sockets, smoke smeared the sky. Engines never stopped. This isn't war, it's the unmaking of men. Chains whipped the ground like metal snakes, touching buried mines and cracking the world. A blown chain arced and crashed onto 2 crouching Germans, dropping them like stones. A Panzerfaust shot at a drum, bounced uselessly. From the flank, an angled gun sighted under a Sherman's skirt. Steel slammed home. The tank halted. Smoke coughed from its engine. A follow-up punctured the turret from below. The gun still raked the line, stitching dirt and flesh. The other 2 tanks crawled past the burning hulk, indifferent to the explosions cooking off inside. There were maybe a dozen defenders left standing. A Hanomag dragged up the last card, a 75mm pack. The crew unloaded like a drill team under fire, hands sure, faces grim. The Goliath robot operator. Cornelius Taba counted vehicles without meaning to. He'd been trained to count. Bays, spans, loads, and now this. Endless engines filing ashore. No horses, no carts, no pause between need and answer. He understood then what his brother on the Eastern Front had written in a single bitter line. It isn't courage that wins here, it's factories. They ferried him to a trawler-turned-carrier and then to a holding pen behind the dunes. The British sappers drifted past like men finishing a long shift. One of them, bare arms ropey with muscle, a carpenter's pencil tucked behind his ear, paused to stare at the Goliath controller still looped around Taba's wrist. He reached down and freed it, turning the box over as if it were a puzzle from a market stall. "Little tank," he said, the word thick and careful. "Little bomb." He set the box on a crate, as gently as if it were wounded. Big mess. That night, the sky flickered inland, a silent storm of muzzle flashes and signal lamps. The tide breathed and retreated, leaving half-buried obstacles glistening like bones. Taba slept in fits, shivering under 2 blankets though the air was mild. Each time he closed his eyes, the tiny tracked rectangle ran again over the sand toward the dark underbelly of a tank. Each time it arrived, each time he pressed. Within days, he was in a wire city on the English coast, a camp that smelled of tea and creosote and seaweed. The routine was orderly to the point of insult. Counted, washed, vaccinated, issued a number and a kit. A doctor listened to his chest and frowned at a rasp he'd ignored since Russia. "You'll live," the man said, not unkindly. "Try not to run marathons." Interrogation was a table with 2 chairs, a file that already knew things, and an officer who asked for specifics that seemed too small to matter. "How many Goliaths in B-19? How many spares? Where was your cable stored?" Taba answered, because there was nothing left to hide that hadn't already been dug out of the sand by bulldozers. When they asked what he thought of the machine, he surprised himself. "It's precise," he said, "and stupid. It goes where you tell it as long as the wire holds. The wire never holds." He was sent to a work detachment inland, timber and culverts and fences that didn't have to fit inside camouflage nets. The camp commandant had been a schoolmaster. He ran the place like a stern classroom. Fences were mended properly, gates hung straight, tools counted in and out as if they were verbs. On Sundays, the Anglican vicar preached about forgiveness, and the baker sold yesterday's loaves at half price to prisoners who had found odd jobs in the village. Taba repaired a farmer's broken pump for 2 apples and a nod. He learned the English for spanner and level and "it will hold." At night in the barrack light he drew, not faces, not maps, mechanisms, a cable winch that wouldn't tangle under fire, a tracked carriage with a shield that might survive stray bullets, a controller with 2 redundant lines like nerves. He didn't intend to build them. He wanted to understand why the little machines had failed so beautifully. There were fanatics in the wire, boys who still whispered about werewolves and secret weapons, and a Führer sleeping under a mountain. One tried to recruit him, tapping the planed edge of a bunk as if it were a drum. "We can take the lorries," the boy said. "We can make a run for the coast." Taba looked at the boy's hands and saw the Goliath controller trembling in them. "The wire never holds," he said. The boy called him a coward under his breath and moved on. Letters from home took weeks, then months. His mother wrote about potatoes and a roof that would not stop leaking, about a neighbor's son who had not come back from the east. She didn't ask what he had done at the beach. She asked if England was green. He wrote back that it was, and that the bread was soft, and that the men here built roads as a matter of course, instead of as a matter of war. When the war ended, he did not cheer. The camp cheered for him. The guards banged tin cups on rails, and a radio declared things finished in a crackling voice. He felt only a slackness, like a cable finally paid out to the last turn. Repatriation became lists and trucks and ferries and, at last, a city that had been his, and now was a set of edges and gaps. He waited 3 hours on a platform whose roof was gone, watching rain fall in straight lines through empty trusses. Home was a room that smelled of coal and cabbage and the thick, tired love of a woman who had run out of words. His brother did not come to the door. He did not come at all. A neighbor told him gently that the letter from the east had been right. Factories had won, and forests had eaten the rest. Work came as it always had, first under the table, then on it. He fixed pumps and doors and the small bones of houses. He married because it was time to have someone to speak to at supper. He did not join any party. He joined the habit of waking before dawn and making sure with his hands that something in the world would not fall down today. On a shelf in his workshop sits a box he built from scrap oak. Inside, wrapped in brown paper, are 2 brass toggles and a bakelite wheel he carved to replace a memory. Sometimes, when the radio is off and the rain is steady, he takes the wheel out and turns it in his palm, feeling the old thrum in his fingers. His son once asked what it was. "A part for a thing that didn't work," he said, and put it back. He never returned to the beach. A customer, years later, sent him a postcard of Normandy. Blue water, parasols, children running where the obstacles had been. He turned it over and read the caption in 3 languages. He did not mail it on. He tucked it into the oak box, under the toggles. At night, he still dreams in wire. The paying out, the tension, the invisible tug. In the good dreams, the line holds long enough to steer something small to a safe place. In the bad ones, the cable parts with a sound he cannot forget, and the machine spins and spins until the tide takes it. If asked, once, only once, what he learned from the little tracked coffins, he said this: "A clever device will obey you in the dumbest place on earth until the world, which is larger than devices, says no. Then you need more than a switch." In the mornings, he opens the shop and sweeps the floor. He sets his level on the bench and watches the bubble find its center. Out on the street, a lorry passes. Diesel, tar, a load of gravel for a new road to the next town. And he feels, briefly, that he has crossed a wire that finally did not break. The Goliath robot operator. First light. The first scraps of news came by runner. Attacks to the southwest. Gliders down. No one knew the scale. Everyone scattered to their posts. Cornelius Tarber gathered 10 men from his engineer team. 5 he sent to the house-to-house strongpoints. With the other 5 he trotted down toward the Goliath bunker, a concrete knot buried in the beach line and disguised with painted rock. Inside, a concrete throat led to a round chamber under a vaulted lid. 3 Goliaths sat ready on their rails. 5 more waited in the tunnel, tanks topped to give them nearly a kilometer's run. A slit embrasure and a periscope let them watch the strand without showing a face. At 0300, they checked each little tracked vehicle, choked the carbs, pulled the cords. Engines caught and chattered. Exhaust thickened the air until the bunker breathed like a garage with no doors. Jokes died at the teeth. Old reserve men with stone faces and beardless boys shivered shoulder to shoulder, shipwrecked together before a storm. Dawn's first smear touched the sand, and the world detonated. Naval guns found the shore with a violence that turned concrete to a drum. The vault hummed. Dust sifted. Shockwaves punched through hairline seams and into crouched chests. Someone sobbed. Someone else bolted for the tunnel, and a Gefreiter smashed him back with a fist. Even Italy hadn't shaken like this, Tarber thought. The ships had brought the end of the world with them. Then the aircraft came, low, stubby-nosed fighter bombers skimming the lip of the seawall, stitching the flanks, raking obstacles, sawing at machine gun pits. The rocket's hiss wrote white lines over wet sand. Through the smoke, Tarber saw them. Shermans wearing canvas skirts swollen like lifebelts, tanks swimming. The engineer in him marveled a heartbeat, so the rumors were true. Then the moment was gone. "Goliath! Eins!" the lieutenant snapped. The first little tank whirred out through the armored dogleg, a toy in a cataclysm. 20 meters down the beach, a shell burst. The control cable flicked and parted like a violin string. The box froze, rocking, stupid and obedient, with no orders left to carry. Zwei! The second tracked into a shell crater and vanished, its detonation a brief, impressive nothing. One Sherman burned. The others climbed, firing, punching holes in nests that had only names on maps. Drey! Loss! Taba shoved the third into the slot, paid out cable, guided across a lace of craters, and then the world narrowed to men. They came suddenly, a file of 20 in battle dress and British helmets, Canadians, passing within meters of the slit without seeing it. A jumpy private fired. One Canadian folded, the rest wheeled, mouths open, rifles lifting. One carried a flamethrower. The tongue of fire swept the entry in a single bright syllable. 2 Germans lit at once, human torches crashing into their mates, spreading panic like burning oil. A stored Goliath took the wash and did not explode by some grace, but the tunnel bloomed with smoke. The lieutenant, his cheeks spattered with burning fuel, turned and ran uphill for the auxiliary exit. He hit a Canadian head-on at the top. The rifle butt flashed. White light burst behind Taba's eyes. He fired blind. 2 snaps. The man fell. The beach beyond had become an anthill kicked by a god. Everything burned. Everything fell. Hand to hand flared along the shingle. Bursts, screams, German curses, English orders. Taba tumbled into a trench and landed on 2 bodies intertwined. A German and a Canadian locked together forever. Boys really, looking like brothers. He crawled, blood in his mouth, until he found 3 Germans sliding along a communication trench. They ran together toward the next prepared line, skipping mortars, guessing at mines, flinching at bullets they could not see. One of the trio vanished in a flash and a pop. The mine had been waiting for his specific foot. Another went down under friendly fire, panic traveling faster than recognition. Taba and a young grenadier from the east kept moving. The boy's lips were split, his hands shook so badly he couldn't see to clip. He barely understood orders. He followed because Taba moved without pausing. The second line was a slot in the earth, braced with sandbags and planks. A Feldwebel ran the dump like a miser, slapping boxes into hands, cartridges, stick grenades, 2 Panzerfauster already cocked. Twin MG-42s covered the slope, blankets over their jackets to keep the barrels from seizing in the heat. A Saarland kid with a shirt tied round his bleeding scalp muttered to his mother under his breath. Someone else cried quietly. There was no spare minute for comfort. Taba peered through a gap. The beach road below was cratered and clogged with wreckage. The sky was a crosshatch of smoke and contrails. Above it all, the fighter bombers came and went, their invasion stripes flashing. The orchards beyond the dunes were broken ribs now, apples gone, branches hung with canvas and men. He heard it before he saw it. The low animal grinding of the Churchill crocodile coming again. Tracks crushed stone and bone alike. A sagging telephone wire at their parapet caught and flared like a fuse. Then the flame itself arrived, short, white-hot, and liquid. The first scream wasn't from the man on fire, it was from his mate watching him burn. Fuel soaked down, and the burning soldier thrashed as if he could wriggle out of his own skin. A second sheet of fire found the gap and took the helper too. Taba crawled backward, elbows and heels. The boy from the east stumbled, fell across a wounded man, and both blossomed into one bright, awful color. They screamed together, one in German, the other in a language Taba didn't know. There was nothing to do. The trench had become a kiln. Ammunition cooked, mud bubbled, orders turned to noise. An officer tried the ladder. A burst cut him in half. His intestines draped a post like obscene bunting. Taba jumped without planning it. Smoke wall, broken wire, blind tumble down an embankment. His face burned. Vision narrowed. He tripped over a man from his battalion and recognized him by his boots. The jaw was gone. He kept going on hands and knees until he collided with 2 Germans running weaponless, hatless, grey with ash. They didn't speak. They ran beside him. They crossed a wheat field already converted to charcoal. At the hedgerow, a burst crackled. One of the 2 pitched forward, the back of his head open like a smashed loaf. Deutsch! Deutsch! Taba croaked, hands up. Branches parted. A German patrol stared back. Faces blacked, branches in their netting, weapons steady. Under a tree, a Hanomag idled. SS Panzergrenadiers lounging around it with the eerie calm of men whose fight hadn't reached them yet. One laughed. Another offered a canteen. A sergeant with a radio slung over his shoulder trotted up. "Report!" he barked. Taba's tongue stuck to his teeth. He found 3 words, each one a nail. Crocodile. All dead. He drank, finally, and for the first time in hours, closed his eyes.